I was 13 at the time. Back then, I had a buddy named Aiden. He was older by a couple of years, but we got along well because our houses were right next to each other. The rest of our neighborhood was mostly old folks, so there weren't many other kids to hang out with. Most nights, we played random games outside until we got too tired or our parents called us in. This was back when the internet wasn't a big deal, so this was our go-to entertainment. One of our favorite games was hide and seek, with a twist. The seeker had to use a flashlight at all times. The rule was simple. The seeker couldn't turn it off, and if the light caught the hider, the game was over. It added a unique twist because the hider could figure out the seeker's location and use it to their advantage. But the seeker could also shine the light from a distance, ending the game. Our usual playground was the close parts of the neighborhood, but sometimes we made it more exciting by including the woods at the edge of our neighborhood. There was no limit on how far the seeker could go, but we usually stayed close because playing in the woods at night could get pretty creepy. One evening, it was my turn to hide. Aiden and I decided to make the woods the playing area for this round. I wanted to make it a real challenge, so I went further into the woods than I usually did. Soon, I was deep in the dark, with no house lights in sight. I couldn't even see the moon. Since Aiden had the flashlight, moving through the woods was a real challenge, with only a sliver of moonlight for guidance. After walking for a while, I stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. It seemed like the perfect hiding spot. There was no way Aiden would find me in there. I went inside, made my way to the stairs, and climbed up to a bedroom. From the single window, I could no longer see my neighborhood, which was now too far away. I waited there for a long time, but nothing happened until I spotted Aiden outside the window. Only he wasn't using the flashlight. He was cheating. He was tired of giving away his position, so he'd either cover the light with his hand or turned it off. I watched as his silhouette approached the cabin, the leaves crunching under his footsteps. He got so close that he disappeared from the window, and I could still hear him downstairs. Then, to my shock, I saw Aiden in the distance, holding the flashlight, but I could still hear the footsteps downstairs. It slowly dawned on me that the person downstairs wasn't Aiden. I dove under a nearby bed, my heart pounding. I heard the footsteps slowly climbing the stairs and then the click of a gun. My heart was racing. Moments later, a large pair of boots entered the room, boots that couldn't belong to Aiden. They stood by the door for what felt like an eternity, and then turned and left the room. I took the opportunity to crawl out from under the bed and leap out of the window. As I landed and started running, I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't look back. Aiden saw me running and pointed his flashlight, claiming that he could see me, declaring himself as the winner. But I didn't stop running. His expression changed when he saw something behind me. He started running with me towards my house, and finally, we made it back to safety. Both of us were shaken and confused. Aiden asked who the man behind me was, which sent shivers down my spine. I explained the whole story, and he didn't doubt a word. We told our parents, downplaying it to keep them from panicking. They called the police, who searched the cabin and the woods for hours, but found nothing. After that, our parents forbade us from going into those woods. I wasn't disappointed. You couldn't pay me enough to go back there. The whole experience was traumatizing, especially for me, and neither of us ever figured out who that was that night. A couple of months ago marked our second anniversary. My wife and I decided to take a break from work and do something special. We lived in Wyoming and opted to rent a cabin in the snowy mountains for a few days. It might not have been the wildest idea, but we thought it would have been a nice romantic getaway. Besides, the cabin owner was a friend of a friend who offered us a discount. This cabin was located in the middle of nowhere. To reach it, you had to navigate a small, secluded private road, and the nearest house was probably a mile away. We weren't privy to the details when we booked it, but once we arrived, we were too captivated by the cabin's charm to be bothered. It looked like something out of a postcard, and the isolation somehow added to its coziness. We were surrounded by endless trees, but that also meant no phone service. On the first night, we snuggled up by the fireplace, watching a movie on my laptop. As the night grew later, we decided to cap it off with a soak in the hot tub on the back porch. That's when I realized I left my swimming trunks in the car parked out front. Here's the thing. It had been snowing all day, and quite a bit had piled up. When I went outside, I noticed a fresh set of boot prints in the snow that didn't belong to me or my wife. They came from the depths of the forest to one of the living room windows and then back into the woods. A couple of red flags went up. We hadn't heard any knocking, and the boot prints led to the window, not the door. I told my wife about it, and she was more unsettled than I was. But I guess to be fair, we were in the middle of nowhere. This was an odd occurrence that warranted some concern. We decided to drive to a nearby town where we had cell service and messaged the cabin owner, asking if any of his friends had stopped by or if he was expecting any visitors that night. We sent him a text and waited for 30 minutes, but received no response, which was understandable considering the late hour. Calling him was an option, but it was late, so we chose to head back to the cabin, hoping for a response by morning. We figured maybe we were overreacting, and we planned to go into town the next day. Back at the cabin, neither of us felt like sitting in the hot tub anymore, so we just went to bed. We were both exhausted from the day. Fast forward to 3 a.m., I woke up, but I wasn't sure what had roused me, because usually I'm a heavy sleeper. That's when I heard a soft bump on the bedroom window. The curtains were drawn, so I couldn't see what made the noise. I assumed it was just a piece of snow falling on the glass, so I tried to go back to sleep. But a few seconds later, the sound came again, this time louder. I was becoming concerned, so I climbed out of bed to investigate. I opened the curtains, but couldn't see anything. I used my phone's flashlight, but the glare on the window was blinding. To get a better look, I had to open it. As soon as I did, I spotted fresh boot prints in the snow right beneath the window. Panic began to creep in. I shone my flashlight at the trees, following the trail of boot prints, and that's when I saw a figure standing in the snow, about 10 yards away, looking straight at me. I closed the window as calmly as I could, woke up my wife, and told her we had to leave right away. Naturally, she was bewildered and asked why, but I didn't answer her question, knowing it would only scare her more. I told her we had to pack up our things, and thankfully she did without any further inquiry. Within minutes, our belongings were ready at the front door. I opened it, and we sprinted to the car. As I reversed out of the driveway, my wife screamed. I turned my head and saw the figure again, this time right beside the house, watching us depart. I hit the gas pedal and sped down the private road. When we got cell service, we texted the cabin owner, explaining everything. Later that morning, he responded, saying that he had gone to the cabin and found boot prints around the entire building. The prints had stopped at every window. We didn't know what to make of this information. It was terrifying, no doubt, but the situation was now out of our hands. We cut our trip short and spent the rest of our days off at home. We still don't know who that figure was or what they were trying to do that night. We're not even sure we want answers to those questions. As far as we know, nothing else happened, and the situation never escalated further. I have a memorable night from when I was about a week shy of turning 18. It was a warm, late summer night, roughly around 2 a.m. I was with two friends whom I'll call Jacob and Stephen. We were in Stephen's basement, engaging in activities that probably weren't the best for our age. However, we grew tired of that quickly and decided to go out in search of something more interesting. Jacob suggested a place where other teenagers would often gather. It was near a small lake deep in the nearby forest. We grabbed a couple of old flashlights and began walking. It took a while to get there, but when we arrived, we were disappointed to find it deserted. Jacob had said that this spot was popular among teenagers, especially at this hour, but it seemed luck wasn't on our side. Even more bored than before, we decided to walk around the lake in hopes of finding someone. On the other side, we noticed an old, seemingly abandoned cabin. Of course, we couldn't resist the urge to explore it. I won't deny that we made quite a bit of noise. As we ascended to the cabin's upper floor, we came across a small bedroom filled with various old items covered in dust. We were sorting through them when, suddenly, the wooden cabin door creaked open. All three of us froze and exchanged anxious glances. We stood there, holding our breaths, as we heard faint footsteps downstairs and a man's voice saying, "I know you're up there." The voice sounded older, and I was genuinely fearful of my life at that moment. Jacob, realizing the seriousness of the situation, silently signaled us to hide in a small closet in the corner of the room. We closed the closet door as quietly as possible and squeezed ourselves into the cramped space. We remained still, hardly daring to make a sound. The man climbed the stairs and reached the entrance of the room. "I can hear you," he warned. We stayed frozen, not moving a muscle. The man started rummaging through the room, and then the closet door's knob slowly turned. It creaked open, revealing our confined hiding spot. Stephen, who was at the front, reacted quickly by pushing the man to the ground. We bolted out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the cabin as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we reached Stephen's house again. In the basement, we spent about a good 5 or 10 minutes trying to catch our breath. The whole experience left us in shock. That's when Stephen mentioned something that sent shivers down our spines. When he pushed the man, he saw him drop a small handgun on the ground. We didn't sleep that night. We sat there in stunned silence. We couldn't understand how the man could have been living there. The place was undeniably abandoned. If you saw him, you'd think the same thing. We never figured out where he came from or what he looked like because none of us got a good enough look at him. The three of us are still close friends today, but we've never ventured back into that part of the woods for obvious reasons. Even now, I wonder what might have happened if Stephen hadn't acted the way he did when the closet door swung open.